At 2:13 a.m., my door camera detected motion. I thought it was just another false alert. But when I opened the app, there was already someone standing there. No entry clip, no footsteps, no hallway movement, just a man. Standing directly outside my door, completely still, and he didn't move for 47 minutes. At 2:13 a.m., my phone woke me up with a motion alert. 5 minutes later, I was standing at my front door with my hand on the handle, and I still wish I had never opened it. I want to be clear about something before I get into this, because I know how these things sound when you read them on the internet. I'm not a person who believes in ghosts. I'm not someone who watches paranormal content or gets invested in that kind of stuff. I'm a 34-year-old data analyst who drinks too much coffee and whose most exciting hobby is repainting Warhammer figures on Sunday afternoons. I say that not to make myself sound boring. I mean, I am boring, but that's not the point. I say it because I need you to understand the kind of person I am when I tell you that what I'm about to describe has genuinely and permanently changed something in me. There's a version of me that existed before October of last year, and there's the version sitting here now, and they are not the same person. I moved into the Caldwell Arms in August. It's one of those old brick buildings that used to be elegant and is now just tired. The kind of place that has crown melding and original hardwood floors and a boiler that sounds like someone gargling gravel at 4 in the morning. The building has 9 units. When I moved in, only 4 of them were occupied, including mine. The hallways always felt like they were holding their breath. I installed the camera because of a package theft, which is maybe the most mundane reason in the world to do something that will ruin your life. I'd had a book delivered, a hardcover, nothing valuable, and it disappeared between 3 p.m. and when I got home at 6. I reported it to the building manager, a guy named Phil, who looks like every building manager who has ever existed, and he shrugged and said the exterior camera by the main entrance had been broken for 2 months and he was waiting on the part. So I bought one of those wireless doorbell cameras, the kind that sends motion alerts to your phone. I mounted it myself on a Friday night, tested it by walking back and forth in the hallway a few times, and went to bed feeling accomplished. That was September 28th. The alert on October 14th was not the first alert I'd received. In the 2 weeks since I'd installed it, I'd gotten maybe 30 or 40. My neighbor across the hall, a quiet woman in her 60s named Deb, triggered it whenever she left for work at 6 a.m. The building super triggered it when he came to fix the radiator. I even got one at 11 p.m. one night that turned out to be a moth flying close to the lens. So, when my phone buzzed at 2:13 a.m., I did what I always do. I rolled over, squinted at the notification banner, groaned, and unlocked my phone to dismiss it. I opened the app out of habit more than concern. The hallway in the camera feed was empty. I mean the kind of empty that a hallway is at 2 in the morning. The overhead fluorescent light that the building keeps on a timer was doing its usual thing. The one nearest my door flickers slightly, always has, and it gives the footage this subtle, rhythmic pulse that you stop noticing after a while. The carpet runner in the center of the hallway, that faded burgundy thing that probably hasn't been replaced since 1987, the fire extinguisher case at the far end, the closed doors. Nothing. I watched for maybe 10 seconds, decided it was another moth, put my phone face down and started to fall back asleep. The second alert came at 2:14 a.m. Same hallway, same flickering light. A man was standing in front of my door. He was just there. That's the only way I can describe it. In the first alert's footage, the hallway was empty. In the second, he was standing maybe 4 feet from my door, not approaching, not in the middle of walking toward it, just standing, fully formed, like he'd materialized between one frame and the next. And the thing that made my stomach drop in a way that took me a moment to understand was that the camera had not triggered a motion alert between those 2 clips. There was no alert for him arriving because as far as the camera was concerned, he hadn't moved to get there. He was wearing dark clothing. I thought at first it was all black, but looking at the footage later, a larger screen, I could see the jacket had some kind of texture, maybe corduroy or canvas, and the pants were a very dark navy. He was wearing boots, not dress boots, work boots. He had his head down, chin nearly to his chest, so I couldn't see his face at all. Just the top of his head, dark hair, slightly damp looking, like he'd come in out of the rain, except I'd looked at the weather earlier that night and it hadn't rained. He wasn't doing anything. He was just standing there. I sat up in bed and put my feet on the floor. I remember my heart rate was elevated, but my mind was still operating in the rational part. I was thinking about the most normal explanation. Drunk guy, wrong floor, waiting for someone. I looked at the footage again, and there was something about the absolute stillness of him that made me reconsider calling out through the door immediately. Drunk people sway, they shift their weight, they take out their phone to check the unit number. This man was not moving at all, not in any way that I could detect. No rise and fall of shoulders from breathing, no micro shifts of weight. He was like a photograph of a man standing in a hallway. I watched the live feed for a full minute and he didn't move. I got up and crossed to my front door. I only have a 500 square foot apartment, so this took about 6 steps. And I looked through the peephole. The peephole shows the hallway in that fisheye distortion, and it took me a second to register what I was seeing because the peephole confirmed what the camera showed. A man standing very still, head down, a few feet from my door. I put my hand on the door handle, and then I didn't turn it because I couldn't explain why. But something felt deeply wrong about opening the door at that moment. It was like that feeling when you're driving and you inexplicably slow down a half second before something happens. I just didn't. Instead, I went back to my phone and pulled up the camera app and watched. He stood there for 47 minutes. I know because I watched almost all of it. I sat on the edge of my bed and I watched a man stand in my hallway without moving for 47 minutes. I kept telling myself I'd call the police in the next 30 seconds, and then I'd watch for another minute, and then I'd tell myself the same thing again. At some point, I pulled up the non-emergency line on my phone and had my thumb over the call button, but I didn't press it because what was I going to say? There's a man standing in my hallway not doing anything? He's not making noise? He hasn't knocked or spoken or tried the door? I knew how that conversation was going to go. He just stood there. At 3 a.m., I went and checked the peephole again. Still there. At 3:07 a.m., I looked at the app. Still there. At 3:19 a.m., I heard the building creak the way old buildings do at night, a settling sound from deep in the walls, and I looked at my phone again without thinking about it. Just a reflex. The hallway was empty. No motion alert. No clip of him leaving. He'd been there and then he wasn't, exactly as he'd arrived, and the camera had recorded nothing in between. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed until the light started coming through the blinds, and then I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table and tried to think clearly about it. The rational part of my brain had a list of explanations. Camera lag. Maybe there was a delay, and I'd been watching non-live footage without realizing it. A glitch in the motion detection. Someone playing a prank. Someone in a medical episode who'd wandered in off the street and then wandered out again. I pulled up the full overnight footage on my laptop. The camera records in 30-second clips when motion is triggered and saves the last 3 seconds before the trigger as a buffer. What I was looking for was any clip that would show him arriving or leaving, anything with movement. What I found was this. The clip at 2:14 a.m. begins with the last 3 seconds of empty hallway, and then in the 4th second he is there. No transition. The previous frame shows nothing. The following frame shows him. It's not a blur, not an artifact, not compression weirdness. The footage is clear and consistent across both frames. the fluorescent light flickering the same way in both, and he simply is not there and then is. The clip of him leaving doesn't exist. The motion sensor never triggered again until Deb left for work at 6:15 a.m. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't scared. I was scared enough that I texted a friend of mine named Marco, who I've known since college, and I sent him the clip without any context at like 7 a.m. and just said, "Can you look at this?" He called me 11 minutes later and asked if it was something I'd edited, and when I told him no, he got quiet in a way Marco rarely gets quiet and said, "Okay, so what do you want to do about it?" What I did was contact my building management and ask about the stairwell camera. This is the part that I keep coming back to. The Caldwell Arms has a camera at the base of the stairwell. It's old, lower resolution than mine, but it covers the ground floor landing and the first few steps up to the second floor, which is where my unit is. I had to go through some mildly annoying back and forth with Phil, who initially told me the footage was automatically overwritten every 72 hours, but eventually he let me sit with him in the management office and go through the overnight footage from October 14th. Nobody came through that stairwell between midnight and 6 a.m. Phil watched the footage with me. He saw the same thing I saw. He asked me why I was asking, and I told him I thought I'd heard someone in the hallway in the middle of the night. He frowned and said the only other access point was the elevator, which is on the opposite end of the building from my unit, and that nobody should have been able to reach my end of the hallway without appearing on either the stairwell camera or passing a point visible to the elevator lobby camera, which also records. He pulled that footage. Same thing, nothing between midnight and 6 a.m. Probably a shadow or something, Phil said. These apartment cameras, the compression does weird things. I nodded and said, sure, probably. I became obsessed. I'm not proud of that, but I'm also not going to pretend it didn't happen. I watched the clip probably 200 times over the next week. I took screenshots of the frame before he appeared and the frame where he appears and put them side by side. I posted it on 2 different subreddits without identifying details, asking for technical explanations, and got a lot of responses about motion interpolation and sensor lag and CCTV artifacts, and none of them fully accounted for what I was seeing. I started sleeping with the volume on my phone turned all the way up so I'd hear any motion alerts. I also started looking into the building's history, which is how I found out about Raymond Fell. This was not something I went looking for in a horror movie way. I wasn't digging through newspaper archives trying to find deaths or tragedies. I was trying to find out if there had been any prior security incidents at the Caldwell Arms. Any police reports, noise complaints, anything that might explain a stranger turning up in the hallway. I filed a public records request for any police calls to the building address. Pretty mundane stuff. What came back included, along with several noise complaints and 1 parking dispute, a welfare check from 2019 and a separate incident code I didn't recognize. I looked it up. It was the code for a found deceased. The person found deceased in the Caldwell Arms in March of 2019 was named Raymond Fell, age 51, resident of Unit 4. My unit is Unit 4. He had died in his apartment of a cardiac event and hadn't been found for 9 days. The thing that should not have affected me but did was the description in the records I found after more digging through county property records and a couple of local news archives. Raymond Fell had been described in a very brief community notice, the kind of thing small local papers run, 2 paragraphs, as a quiet man who worked in facilities maintenance and had lived in the building for 11 years. He was described as someone who kept unusual hours and was rarely seen during the day. There was a surviving sister in another state who had handled the estate and apparently cleared out the apartment within a few weeks. I sat with that for a long time. I want to be really careful here because I am not a person who believes in ghosts, and I am not going to tell you that I became convinced I was seeing a ghost. What I will tell you is that I became aware, in a way I hadn't been before, that a man had lived alone in my specific apartment for 11 years and died there alone and wasn't found for 9 days. And that the hallway my camera faces would have been the hallway he walked through every time he left or came home. And that I now had footage I could not explain of a man standing very still in that hallway at 2 in the morning who arrived without appearing to have walked there. I ordered a secondary camera to cover the stairwell end of the hallway. I told myself it was just to have more data. The second incident happened on November 2nd, 19 days after the first, same time, 2:13 a.m. motion alert, hallway camera, same man, same position, same absolute stillness. Except this time I was ready. I had the app open on my phone within 30 seconds, and I sat there with my lights off and watched the live feed. Just him, standing there, head down. The secondary camera I'd installed at the far end of the hallway showed the same view from the opposite direction. I could see the back of him, and from that angle his stillness looked even less human, because you expect people to breathe, you expect some small movement, and there was nothing. I watched for 11 minutes, and then he raised his head. It happened slowly, not like a person who hears a sound and looks up, which would be fast, reflexive. It happened the way a person moves when they've decided to do something deliberate, slow, and purposeful. His chin came up degree by degree, and his head tilted back slightly, and he was looking at the camera. I can't tell you what his face looked like. The resolution isn't good enough for that level of detail at that distance in fluorescent light. I can tell you that he had a face, eyes, nose, the shape of a jaw, and I can tell you that whatever expression was on it, I could not read it as any expression I had a word for. Not angry, not sad, not vacant. Something else that I don't have a reference for. He looked at the camera for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. I timed it afterward, then he lowered his head again. He stood there for 2 more hours. At 4:29 a.m. he was gone. Same as before, no departing clip, just gone. I know you want me to have not opened the door. I want that too, in retrospect. But here's the thing. By November, I had spent weeks convincing myself there was an explanation, that I was going to find the logical answer, that I was not the kind of person who let things like this drive them to irrational behavior. So when the third alert came on November 11th, again at 2:13 a.m., I decided. I watched until he raised his head. I watched him look at the camera. And then I got up and I crossed my apartment and I opened the door. The hallway was empty. Of course it was empty. I knew it would be. Some part of me was already rehearsing the story I'd tell Marco, the anti-climax of it, the mundane disappointment. I stood in the doorway for a moment and looked in both directions. The fluorescent light flickered the way it always does. The carpet runner ran the length of the hall. Nothing. I was about to go back inside when I looked down. There were wet footprints on the carpet. Not soaked through dramatic footprints, just the faint, damp impressions that boot soles leave when they're slightly wet. They were there, in front of my door, in the shape of 2 feet, standing next to each other, facing toward my door. I crouched down and pressed my fingers to one of them. The carpet was damp, not dried, not old. Damp in the way something is damp when it happened recently, when it happened moments before. I went back inside and locked the door, and I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet under the sink, and I didn't move until it was light outside. Epilogue, Portland. I moved out at the end of November. I know that's the part that sounds the most like I'm admitting something, and maybe I am. I told my landlord it was a job opportunity, which was partly true. I did take a remote position that meant I could live anywhere, and I chose Portland because my sister lives there and I wanted to be near family for a while. There were other reasons. I didn't install a security camera in the new apartment. I was fully committed to not installing one. I lasted 6 weeks before I ordered one, and I told myself it was because I lived alone in a new city and it was sensible, and that was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. The new camera went up in mid-January. I got the usual alerts: the hallway, neighbors, a delivery person, a maintenance worker, normal things. For 3 months, comply normal things. I started sleeping better. I started cooking again and seeing my sister on weekends and feeling like a person with a regular life. On April 7th at 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I'm still lying here looking at the notification on my screen. I've been looking at it for 36 minutes. It's just sitting there at the top of my screen. Motion detected. The preview image that loads in the notification is small, maybe a 1/4 inch across, and I can't make out what's in it. I haven't opened it. I don't know if I'm going to. Here's the thing I keep coming back to, the thing that keeps me lying here instead of opening the app. Raymond Fell lived in that building for 11 years. He worked in facilities maintenance. He was described as someone who kept unusual hours and was rarely seen during the day. He lived there for 11 years and then he died there, and they didn't find him for 9 days. In 11 years, he must have come and gone thousands of times. He must have known every creak and tick of that building, every quirk of the fluorescent lights, every face in every unit. He knew that hallway the way you only know a place when you've walked it in the dark without turning the lights on, when it's so familiar your body navigates it on its own. And then someone new moved into his apartment. Someone new installed a camera. And whatever came to stand outside that door, whatever it was that stood there in the dark with its head down, not breathing, and then raised its eyes to look directly into the lens, whatever left damp footprints facing toward a closed door and then simply ceased to be there. It followed me here. It knows what city I'm in now. It knows which floor I'm on and which door is mine. And it's standing out there in the hallway at 2:13 in the morning, and it's waiting for me to open the notification and see its face. I'm gonna put my phone down now. I'm not gonna open it. I'm just gonna lie here in the dark. Because if I hear footsteps in the hallway, I'll know something is out there. And if I don't hear any footsteps at all, I'll know it's already standing outside my door.